Hi, I'm Ryan Stewart, a developer evangelist with Adobe, and I am here with Ben Galbraith and Dion Almaer, and we are going to talk about the state of the web. Now, Ben and Dion have been kind of web luminaries for a long time. They started Ajaxian. They have a new site called Function Source, and they had a startup that they just now sold to Walmart, and so they're running mobile strategy now for Walmart. And they are kind of at the forefront as well as the core of what makes the web great. So we're going to pick their brain about what's good about the web currently, what's been great about the web in the past, and then what's happening in the future. So thanks guys for joining us.
Oh,
Thanks,
pleasure.
Ryan.
Cool. So what is, in your mind, what's the kind of state of the web currently in terms of what's exciting, what's interesting, what's momentous about it on par with kind of the old school Web 2.0 days where everything was new and exciting? What's that right now for the web?
You want to go first?
Yeah, sure, okay. So for me, what's exciting about the web is really the sum total of what we've been seeing evolve over the past few years. Because I think starting like even 3 or 4 years ago, we started to see a new wave of technologies that were imbued in the browsers that have just enormous potential. But what's interesting is I don't think a lot of that potential has yet been realized because so many of the iconic properties that we visit on a regular basis are really sort of relics of Web 1.0. And I think the best of what we've seen are sort of patches to take advantage of what we used to call Ajax and sort of sprinkling the functionality here and there. But in reality, today's browsers are modern app runtimes, whereas most websites are sort of pamphlets online with a little bit of interactivity. And I think as people start to take advantage of these JavaScript runtimes that are orders of magnitude faster than they used to be, and hardware accelerated canvas and amazing CSS effects and really low latency network capabilities and so forth, we're going to see a level of capability, a level of website interaction that we just haven't seen yet. And so what excites me most, Ryan, is the potential. And I haven't seen a lot of properties that really exercise that potential yet, but I really think they're just around the corner. And I think when that happens, we're going to be really blown away with what we've got.
And it seems like, yeah, having the client built into the browser, where the browser it's always been a client, right? But now it's a fully functioning, like you said, client runtime. So kind of over the past 6 months, we've seen the browsers really evolve and add functionality and follow the HTML5 specification. So over that time frame, the past 6 months, what's been the most fundamental thing for you guys in the world of JavaScript and the web to make this possible, or to kind of make what that vision is actually be able to be implemented?
Sure. Should I take this one first?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure. So with JavaScript, ever since V8 came out in the Chrome world, we saw these big war of the engines, and things are going great. They continue to get faster and faster, and we're seeing things that if you went back a few years and you said to someone, there's a language called Clojure that's this Java-based language, right? And these guys are going to go and take some time to make that work on top of JavaScript. People will be like, why would you do that? That makes no sense at all. We've got this great Java bytecode, great VM. You'd never want to do that. Well, that just happened yesterday, right? And there's a whole slew of languages sitting on top of it. So the engines are at a point where they're fantastic. They're getting better all the time. That's great. Now I'm excited because the browsers have kind of moved on from that, and they've gotten up the stack. And so now we're seeing with all the great CSS transforms, hardware acceleration of everything, a lot of stuff is going into performance on the other kind of portions.
So yeah, now that we have a fantastic engine, is performance at the JavaScript level still important, or can we focus now on design and kind of the look and feel and making some of that, what I would call RIA interactivity, viable and real in the browser? Are we close to that yet?
I think there's still headroom to get more performance gains, but I think what's most missing in the JavaScript runtimes are the debugging tools. I think the piece that's missing the most for me is memory inspectors and sort of the sophisticated sort of telemetry of what's happening in the VM that we have on, for example, the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine. And until we really have that, I mean, Chrome does have something, but when you compare it to what we've had from Java for a decade and what we have in Objective-C for the past few years, it's really quite primitive. And I think in addition to the JVM, what's happening in client rendering technologies over the past few months is really, really exciting. I think IE9 going final release status with hardware accelerated canvas is really kind of a mind bender.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then Firefox pulling in the CSS transforms using acceleration that Safari pioneered and that we've had in Chrome for a while. It's also really exciting. So when you think about the sorts of interfaces you can create, that's also really freaking compelling. So I think mixing those two together, you realize that what it means to be a web page is now totally different than what it used to be.
Yeah, and there's all these tiny little APIs that without them you can't build this app experience. So like the history API is this dumb little API that can go in and change the URL without having to access the site. But without that, you have to do all of the chicanery that we've been doing with hashes and the URLs. Exactly. And so it's the sum of all of these little pieces finally coming together in enough browsers that really kind of gives us what we need.
Dion mentioned we put together function source from a clean sheet of paper. It's a total rethink of what a blog could be. We wound up spending more time on the server than on the client. We have these advanced prototypes that we haven't had a chance to roll out yet. But one of the experiences that we've been working on is something that just reinvents what it means to interact in a web page, where when the links come on the page, you click on the link and we actually do all the transitions and all the changes of state right there on the client, instead of relying on the traditional page refreshes that the browser's done. Because traditionally when you click on a link, the browser has to go through the whole request response cycle, repaint the UI, and the UI actually goes through some weird indistinct states where the page is still rendered, but it's no longer interactive, and then it's cleared, and then it's partially rendered and partially interactive, and then finally all the state is applied because we have these speed wars. And so people have these different, micro benchmarks that they try to hit, like this is when it was realized and this is when it's finished. But by controlling all that, we're able to sort of give the user more responsiveness, and we're able to take the sort of indeterminate states and just clear them away. We can preload a lot of link targets, and we can decide what happens when you click on the link. So either we instantly display the results of the link right there without actually having to go out to the network, or maybe we do a transition while we get the data, and instead of having these indistinct states, we do a transition and then whoosh, you're there.
So we're pretty close in terms of making those really nice experiences.
Well, we're actually here. We can do that. We just haven't had the time to finish the development effort on it, but we're here. And what was so exciting is using the technologies Dion described with the history API and some of the other client-side APIs, we can make them fully backwards compatible. Because if you're not on a modern browser, you click on the hyperlink and it does what they've always done since time began in the browser. And so having that sort of graceful failback while still having
things of the web.
Yeah, exactly.
Graceful degradation. Yeah. So now going forward, so look at the next 6 months, what's going to be the critical issue, or what's going to, both in terms of what is going to be great for developers as these technologies, mature is the wrong word, but come together a little bit more, and then also what are the pitfalls? Right? What are people going to be aware of 6 months from now that we're not necessarily looking at today?
Yeah, so we do a lot of work in mobile now, obviously, running mobile engineering. That's what we've been thinking about for a long time. We're at Palm building WebOS, and WebOS was all about building these client systems and using web technologies. And the mobile world is obviously very different than the desktop world. And so I think a lot of the pitfalls kind of come from these different experiences when you have desktop web developers just kind of moving over to mobile, and even tablets, kind of expecting things to work as they work, right? And so we were at Netflix and did a piece there, and they talked about some of the pitfalls that they fell into, where they had people that were using libraries like some jQuery plugin, and they're putting stuff together, and they don't realize, but it does different hacks where it puts things 1,000 pixels over here and moves it in, and then they hardware accelerate it, and then suddenly this div that's 1,000 pixels big is trying to get mapped to the GPU, and it runs out of memory. And so there's tons and tons of issues on mobile. Also, the browsers that we have in mobile, it's fantastic that WebKit came along for the ride, and we got these great engines, but differences between Android and iPhone browsers is very painful. Embedded browsers versus not embedded browsers. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen there.
Okay. What about you? What do you think?
I think until we're able to put third-party browsers, true third-party browsers from the ground up onto iOS, I think the capabilities of the web and mobile are going to be stifled. And I think we're of the view, as so many people are in the industry, that mobile represents the future of general purpose computing, that the mobile platforms of today are the desktop computers of tomorrow, that they're just sort of going to meld together. And so as long as Apple holds on to this restriction, it really sort of has a cloud over what we can do with the web, because if our goal is to deploy a full application using the browser, it's really kind of difficult to feel good about that when Apple's the only game in town, and any rendering bugs that are in WebKit on iOS will affect you, and there's no way out, and there's no real solution. And so you mentioned over the next 6 months, and I think that's a great problem in that time period, because I'm optimistic that over the long term that problem will be solved. I just don't see that Apple can maintain that monopoly over the browser, but until that's fixed, it really makes life really pretty confusing for developers, and sort of puts a hamper on what's possible.
Yeah, one thing that we're doing to kind of work in the now is we're doing a lot of hybrid applications. So everyone thinks of PhoneGap as being able to get your website, wrap it in a nice shell.
Yep.
You can do a lot more with that. People normally think of like literally taking the website and then just making it an app that I can put in the App Store. That's just the basics. You've got a full bridge into native land, and so you can have a hybrid experience where you've got pieces of web and pieces of native. Just like we talked about, everyone likes to pit HTML5 versus Flash, and we've always been fans of you guys because there's a place for these different things, and they actually work best when they work together.
Exactly.
And so there's a lot of that going on.
And the merging of HTML and native will definitely be something interesting to see how people leverage that in good, beneficial ways, because that's you never want to sacrifice the goodness of the web, but there's still a lot of powerful things with native that you want to take advantage of too, especially on mobile.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you guys very much for joining us. It was great to catch up and chat with you and get your thoughts on the future of the web.
Always a pleasure, Ryan.
Yeah,
Great to see you again, Ryan.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, for more information, I would encourage you to check out Function Source and see what these guys have been up to. And then you can also find some more developer and designer resources for targeting HTML5 and the brand new world on the Adobe Developer Connection.